Hi, hello, come on in, everybody. We are your Monday morning quarterbacks. This show right here that you're watching is Green-White-Checkered Finish. My name is Beau, Estes, and to my left is a fully caffeinated Mike Bell. How you doing, Mike?
You're darn right I am. Woo, we run on high octane here, brother.
And it's got his name on it, so he knows whose it is.
This is my coffee, and this is our show, and you guys are part of it. We're interactive. Your comments on the three biggest stories from the racing weekend out in Kansas.
Yeah, that's right. Kansas was the site, and it was a full weekend of good racing. So let's get right to our green flag topic. Mike Bell, nationwide stuff we're talking about here. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. with a huge comeback. Now, it's a tight race in the nationwide series. Who you got winning the championship?
Well, how cool is this, the fact that the guy has battles back in this race, gets into it with Logano, and then he's got to get that car massaged back into shape, yeah. Goes 2 laps down, but then later on, as we go to Green-White-Checker in a race that never wanted to end, Kyle Busch runs out of go-go juice right there at the end. And guess who gets the win? Little Ricky Stenhouse, who's been there before and is now right on the heels of Elliott Sadler and all the other guys that thought they had this thing wrapped up.
So I'm going to just quickly, I'll say that I like Elliott Sadler to win it. There's 3 tracks left, Texas, Phoenix, and Homestead. I think the guy's a veteran. I think he gets it done. But I will say this. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. benefited from something that we saw all weekend long. Lots and lots and lots of cautions. Yep. That allows those guys that are back to get back up to the front, and that benefited him.
No, it was very similar to what we saw on Sunday in the Cup race, and much like Jimmie Johnson, who we'll talk about in a second, have just great work between the crew and the driver and getting that car back and eventually on the lead lap, and then the circumstances played out for Stenhouse to get the W.
Yeah, the circumstances did play out wonderfully for him because he did get that win. Let's move on to our next topic, white flag topic. 14 cautions at Kansas. They did the repaving between the spring race and this race, Mike Bell, in the chase. My question to you, was that a mistake?
Apparently so. I mean, I thought these were the 43 best race car drivers in North America.
They are, I believe.
Not this weekend.
Okay.
These guys looked like it was amateur hour, man. It was like you or me. Hey, get behind the wheel. You want to drive the Richard Petty driving experience without any practice? That's what it looked like. I have no problem with a track owner trying to make his facility better. In this case, it didn't work out. We like to see tracks repaved. Unfortunately, the air got so dirty. 2 lines, almost 1.5 lines, it looked like, as far as racing grooves, and these guys just could not handle it. And carnage, and I'm going to be honest, made for a really terrible race. There was no momentum. Anytime you got things cooking, whammy, somebody hits the wall, and it really took the rhythm out of the race. It worked out for some people like Jimmie Johnson, but I thought this was an awful racing weekend.
Did you say whammy?
Whammy!
Whammy! Hey, I tell you what, we've got a good fan comment here, Jim Weber, so I'm just going to go with him. They should have waited. It was nothing but a wreck fest when drivers like Kyle Busch, Tony Stewart, and Jimmie Johnson spin on their own. Something is wrong with the track, and I think that's the key. They're spinning on their own. If they can't handle it, who can?
I'll never fault the track owner for actually spending money to try and improve
things,
idea. But this one did not work out, and these drivers it did look like amateur hour out there.
Yeah, okay, so let's move on to our checkered finish. Remember earlier we talked about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. coming back? Well, Jimmie Johnson had something similar happen. You see him spinning on his own there. He led for a while, then he went way back, and then he came back. My question to you, 3 words, good, bad, or indifferent, the weekend for Jimmie Johnson. He's in the same position he was with Brad Keselowski coming in.
We were joking around before we started taping Green-White-Checkered with our plucky producer, like the plucky team of 48. Isn't this one of those stories? We could probably go back and look at last year's show and the year before, and a story about the 48 where they overcome something like this, and they get the car back onto the lead lap and eventually into a top 10 finish. And if he does win it, this is one of those races you can point back to and say, Chad Knaus, Jimmie Johnson, the 48 team, these are guys who can overcome adversity and find a way to win. Look, the car looked like a Chevy Volt. It was so smashed up in the back, but they find a way. And then just through, some guys and their pit strategy, the way it played out, Jimmie does get into a top 10 finish and really doesn't hemorrhage any points in this one.
A Chevy Volt, huh?
Well, I mean, it got smaller. I was going to say a Pinto, but that's a Ford product.
I tell you what, here's how the racing weekend was for Jimmie Johnson. It was first good. Then it was bad, and then it was indifferent. So it was all 3. I think in the end, it's a good weekend. Rick Hendrick had nothing but praise for what Jimmie Johnson and that team did. And again, they come out of the race exactly where they went into the race. Close enough with Brad Keselowski. They're within 10 points. Anything could happen, 4 races left.
Look, you wreck a car like that, you figure you're done. Here we go. He was at 30th position. He winds up with a top 10. This is the kind of thing which gets a guy a championship.
Yeah, exactly right. It could happen again. He is the Iceman of the sport. Last weekend, my partner right here coined a new member of our Top Gun team, Goose, Regan Smith. And so let's go with putting a bow on it right about here, because why? I'm going to go with Goose as my point this weekend. He starts 39th, and what does he do? He He goes out and gets himself a top 10. It was a better weekend for Goose. I think he deserves a lot of credit for putting that car in the top 10, especially after blowing an engine last weekend.
And for guys who missed last week's show, Goose meaning if he owned a funeral parlor, nobody would die. He's
Yes.
the good, lovable guy. You know nothing good's going to happen to, but it worked out. All right, here's my little final bell. Danica Patrick, you're going to get into a little war with Landon Castle. You felt he raced you dirty. You're going to get some payback. Well, we've seen this in the sport, well, since back in the 40s. But you've got to know how to take the guy out.
This.
Landon Castle said rule number 1 of taking a guy out is you got to make sure you don't take yourself out. Danica goes to Cup full-time next year. Maybe she'll eke out a win in our lifetime. Whammy number 2. But, I mean, come on, Danica, if you're going to go be Betty Bad Butt, you got to be able to take a guy out without taking yourself out. Embarrassing for Danica. She'll have to work on that.
You feel better now? You get that off your chest?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just so over the Danica hype. Just do something.
She had a top 10 in
Yippee-ki-yay! Woo, confetti!
All right.
And by the way, Landon Castle, he's probably driving an El Camino to next week's race. He makes 1/10 of what she makes.
Do you have another thing to say?
I'm done.
Okay, all right. For my partner, Champ Kind, I'm Beau Estes. Thanks for watching Green-White-Checkered Finish.